Hello and welcome to Runkle of the Bailey. My name is Ian Runkle. I'm a Canadian criminal defense and firearms lawyer. Today I'm going to dabble a little bit in product review, so there's no legal commentary here. Let me know in the comments below if this is something you'd want to see more of, less of, whatever. So I had a headlamp that my dog destroyed, and then by a happy coincidence, a flashlight and headlight manufacturing company reached out to me and said, hey, would you be interested in doing a review? So I thought, sure, why not? Now, they've sent this to me for nothing. This is the Thrunite TH01. I think they charge about 40 bucks for it, so you can weigh that in terms of evaluating bias. I also want to talk a little bit about what the agreement was, just so that you guys are aware of what all was agreed in terms of this. So they wanted me to produce a video above 5 minutes. Shouldn't be a problem. I tend to be a fairly talkative guy. They wanted to include the company logo. Here we go. A picture of the product. Here we go. And the product model, which is in the picture of the product here. They also wanted me to cover the product operations or product highlights, as well as they wanted links to their official website and the Amazon purchase links. So those will be in the description below. Now, I had a condition myself, and that condition was, I said, and I'm quoting here, I think that'll work on the understanding that I'm promising I'll do a review, but I'm not promising anything with regards to the content of the review other than that it'll be honest. So I made sure that they were aware that I'm going to cover the good and the bad here. Now, in terms of function, I mean, it's a headlamp. It's fairly straightforward, but it is fairly comfortable. It has the sort of standard, and I'm just going to see if you can see it here, standard adjustment straps. And this one I actually will give some points to because of the way it's set up, and this sort of rubberized bit here allows you to pull the cord through instead of being attached by loops. That's nice because it lets you get this the center band into the center. You don't end up with that thing that you often end up with headlamps, where there's that center band that ends up off to the side. It's a comfort thing, and it also helps it stay on your head. I do appreciate that. So in terms of the actual ergonomics of it, it's fairly good. It's controlled basically entirely from a single button here. And you can press once to get lower illumination. You can press multiple times to put it into, or sort of double click to take it into turbo, which is the highest illumination. And it's also got, if you triple click it, it's got a pulsing mode, and it's a much more useful pulsing mode than most. Lots of flashlights include like a flashing mode that I haven't thought is all that useful. This at least is an SOS mode. Now, the problem with this button the thing that I don't like is that it's a big exposed button. So if you've got this in a bag, it could easily click on. And now you've got this, on in your bag. And by the time you get to where you need to go, it may be powered down. The solution to that might be to pull the battery out. And that's not really a great solution. I like being able to keep things together. So perhaps it would have been nice if they could have included some sort of, if they're watching this looking for suggestions, some sort of cap that you could put over this might be a fantastic idea. It also has a removable battery, which I do like that you can have multiple batteries. It's a 18350 battery, which costs about 10 bucks. So it's not a cheap battery, but it is rechargeable, and it's rechargeable by means of a small micro USB port, which is protected by a little waterproofing tab. Now, one thing I will note is one of the things about these headlamps is they're really a useful thing when the power goes out and you don't have any illumination. But at that point, you're probably not reading the manual for two reasons. One, the manual is the first thing to go in the trash. And second, if the power is out and it's dark, you're not going to be opening up the manual. This brings us to another sort of minor complaint about this thing, which is this thing kind of feels like a control, even though it's actually the battery knob. So when I handed this to my wife and said, hey, try this out, just to see how, basically the idea is to see, whether these controls were intuitive, whether it was something that you can figure out. And she initially was trying to turn it on by turning the battery knob. And that's not, that's a perfectly reasonable thing. I've had other headlamps that have had a knob on them. What that ended up doing was it got the battery loose, and then even pushing the button, it wasn't working. So she was saying, hey, headlamp doesn't work. That's not a great feature when you're talking about something that you might fumble for in the dark. So I'm not a huge fan of the sort of the battery or the battery knob feels like it's a control. It doesn't feel like you're opening up something. So that is a minor point against it. If you're familiar with this thing, it won't cause you any trouble. Now, it also comes with a bunch of stuff, and I'll sort of cover some. These are some replacement seals for the waterproofing, as well as a replacement little hatch for the micro USB, also part of the waterproofing. They also send a replacement of this rubber bit. Now, this is kind of a mixed blessing, because when I see that they're including a replacement rubber bit, the first thing that tells me is that they know that it's going to wear out. And that's a mixed blessing, or a mixed thing, because on one hand, they know it's going to wear out, and who knows where it's going to fail. This might happen when it's on the trail, when you're in the dark, wherever. It is nice to have another one. I will say that my first thought with this thing would be that it might be better to, on my end, I might just do a little project to replace this with some, leather piece. The other thing is that the controls in terms of adjusting this up and down are done by friction. It's actually that this is a rounded piece within the rubber. Now, that means it's really good at staying in place. I've had things, I used to participate in some like zombie simulation games where you're running around, and some of the headlamps would get tilted downwards or up, if you're involved in vigorous activity, if you get brushed, going through underbrush or the like. This one stays put really well. But staying put might not be what you want, because if you want to adjust the height of it, you either need to, on your head, kind of grab it and hold it and then wrench on it, or it's even better if you take it down and do that yourself. That is not necessarily ideal. You might like it for the stiffness, or you might dislike it. That's kind of a matter of preference. There are some real things that I consider to be big strikes against this. The first, I will say it's quite comfortable to wear, and I'm just going to cut here to a little bit of video because by coincidence, I also had to go and do some, maintenance work in my attic. So when I thought, hey, how will I test the brightness of this? Going up into the attic was a pretty good way, because there's no light in there. So let's just have a look at what that looked like.
As you can see, this is doing a pretty good job. I am not complaining about this. Well, I'm complaining about the task. This is miserable, but the lighting is just fine. Ah, this is wonderful. So this is what I'm up here to fix. One thing that's clear is I am seeing just fine up here. So far, so good.
Now, one thing that was kind of nice is it actually fit perfectly well even over my gas mask. So that was kind of nice. I'm using the gas mask in that just because it makes for a good respirator. It's, hooked up with a particulate filter, so everything's happy there. But one thing I noticed is, they sent it to me charged. I didn't actually bother at this point or at that point and, giving it another charge. I wasn't up there that long. And by the time I came down, it was actually giving me indications that the light was failing, that it was running out of batteries. And so I thought, that's not good. So I gave it another full charge and just saw how long it lasted. And after, it's when you turn it on the turbo mode, it shuts down after about a minute or a little more than a minute. And then after about half an hour, it scales down again. And by about an hour, it's out of juice. That's not something that's fantastic here, because I don't really want to be carrying around a pocket of spare batteries. I kind of feel, and they've got various times. Apparently it'll work a lot longer if you just keep it on low, but the low setting is not terribly strong. I wouldn't want to be using the low setting for much of anything. It might work just fine for sort of close in work where you can, have that light there and, you're fiddling with something. But if I was doing, if I'm going through underbrush or something, I'd probably want the medium or high settings. And it just doesn't seem like it's got the longevity for that. So it works pretty well in terms of if the power is out and you need to, find your way around something, but not really the greatest if you were taking this camping. The other thing is that the battery is sort of not a usual or conventional battery. I've got lots of battery chargers and none of them will charge this thing except the flashlight itself. So that's not a great point in terms of this. Um, Another thing I will note here is that it charges with the micro USB and it comes with a little micro USB cord. Now, the first thing I did was actually take this micro USB cord and chuck it into my general bin of generic cords because I got lots of stuff that charges with micro USB. And so I thought, you know what? I already have cords handy. I don't need this thing. And the problem is that I ended up digging this back out of that bin. I had to actually go find it because this little connector is actually a little bit longer. It's kind of strange. So my other connector, when I'll just see if I can reach that here. This connector, when I tried to connect it into this thing, it just falls right out. And the same thing applies to a whole bunch of other micro USB connectors. So what that means is that this single cord is kind of a failure point for your entire system. If you lose this, then you're going to have a hard time charging this battery unless you buy an entire separate battery charger for it, which of course you don't want to do. So I don't know why they made this design decision. I think it's a serious failing. I would not recommend, I don't like this. I don't know if you'd be able to find other ones like if you're driving along and you've lost this and you're moving from one camping site to another, would you be able to find another one at a gas station, for instance? I don't know. And I kind of suspect maybe not. So in terms of the good, the bad, and the ugly, it's really comfortable to wear. I didn't have any problem with that. It worked just fine in terms of shedding enough light. When I was up in the attic, I was quite happy with it. I had no complaints. But if I needed to be up there a little longer, I might have been a little more unhappy, especially because the time frame between it giving you the warning for it being at like near zero battery and actually dropping out is not that long. It's about 30 seconds. I actually had the serious potential that I could have been still stuck up in the attic in the dark with the battery having failed. I would not have liked that. So it's, I'm being a little harsh on it. I'm not going to throw this thing in the bin. It works just fine. I don't mind it, but it has a lot of serious failings to it that maybe, they sort of advertise this as a bit of a premium product, as a better headlamp than most. And I'm not sure that that's the case. I kind of feel like this headlamp has some substantial flaws that really need to be worked out before this thing can be marketed as sort of a better headlamp. And that's unfortunate. As I said, the flaws here that I will note, apparently proprietary or unique charging cord is a real big problem for me. I don't like that. The runtime is a big problem. It also got quite hot when it was running. When you set it on sort of the high setting and just leave it there, it never got hot enough that I felt like it was going to burn my fingers or anything like that. But I do wonder what would happen to this thing if it got turned on in a pack full of insulating material, because I had it out here where it was, able to vent in the air. If this thing was buried in a pack full of stuff, what would that heat have done to it? It is fairly durable. One thing I tried to capture but failed due to me screwing up with my GoPro was I actually chucked this against my fence and it still works. So the stress test of lobbing it against the fence, and I gave it a decent lob. It wasn't like a full fastball, but it wasn't like a slow pitch kind of thing. It was a decent lob at the fence. It bounced off. It works fine. I also did some waterproofing testing. So I got my lovely assistant Mort here to help me out because they said it was waterproof and it's not raining today. So let's have a look at that. All right, so to test out the waterproofing, we've got the lovely assistant Mort here, shown modeling the flashlight. And Mort is in the shower. So seems to work just fine after, a direct spraying in the shower. I didn't test it with immersion, so I don't know how well it'll do with an actual dunk. I probably wouldn't recommend taking this thing swimming. It doesn't seem like that's what it's designed for, but I could be wrong. I mean, I just didn't test that. So it's not the greatest product on the market. I have had better flashlights. Overall, I'd give it, say, a 3 out of 5. It works. It, functions for what it does, but there's a lot of sort of critical flaws that prevent it from being sort of a top-notch product. So anyway, if you were worried that I was going to be overly kind to this thing, I guess not. I doubt anyone's going to be super inclined to send me anything for further reviews after that, but I just... I started out and, like I said, when I was up in the attic, I really did like this thing. I really thought it was a good product. It wasn't until it started to run out of batteries when I was just coming out of the attic that I went, I got to dig a little bit more. And the more I dug into it, the more things I found that I think would be a problem and that I don't know that you'd necessarily like. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope that you found this to be interesting. I mean, it's not my usual fare. It's not sort of what I usually cover. But let me know what you think. If you say, hey, Runkle, we don't care about your opinions on products, or if you're going to do them on something else, whatever you're sort of feeling on that, let me know. I also want to thank my Patreon supporters at the $50 level: Jonathan Wheeler, Jason Elliott, Canada's National Firearms Association, Slightly Left of Center Good-Natured Hypothetical Firearms Association, Mike, Kyle Martin, Jean-Guy Toussaint, CCFR, and the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. At the $30 level, Sights and Arms Limited and Marc-Olivier Damour. And at the $20 level, Raymond L. McKinnon, Matt Ward, Mark Whittington, Jane Babin Luxor, Dale Nesbitt, Cameron Johnson, Bruno R., Andrew Elsich, and Aaron Del Salt. Thank you as well to the $10 supporters who will be in the crawl immediately following, along with Zora, destroyer of headlamps. Yeah, she's cute, so we forgive her. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope this has armed you with knowledge, and see you next time.